I'm David Hunt, and welcome to The Art Hunter. My guest today is this very unusual artist, filmmaker. Yeah, he's done a bit of that, but his practice is quite unusual with what he's doing these days. It's cardboard. It's made of cardboard, and I can't believe it. The detail that he produces in this cardboard is amazing. Doing New York skyline, phenomenal. And he went over to New York for it. So it's making sets, architectural sets or whatever, but then, we're building this tunnel, or the multiple tunnels here in Melbourne for the new underground, and he has made a model of what his mind has shown, of that huge machine that's cutting through all the rock and whatever, and he's made a model of it, which is part of, it's just finished, the exhibition's just finished. It's called the Metro Tunnel exhibition, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. That's how I met him as well. He's with all other artists doing it. So let's meet him. Let's meet this man that's very crazy with what he does. So, be aware, but it's also brilliant work. I'm in awe of what he does. Daniel, hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, okay, the arts. Where did it all come together for you as a kid? Were you love cutting bits of paper up, or?
Well, actually, there's a photo of me at kindergarten cutting something out of paper with a pair of scissors. So that's maybe a sign of what was to come. But I'm not sure if I did a lot of arts as a kid, but when I hit my teenage years, I started building a spaceship, and for no reason, just to make something, and it wasn't a model of a spaceship.
Yeah.
Like, it was a life-size, technically perfect craft that I believed that if I could get some serious NASA engineers on board, I could probably manage to get it out of the Earth's orbit. That never happened. I think I spent every dollar I ever made on it, and it lived for 8 years as I was making it, and then for another 8 years afterwards, and then it just sort of went away, and then I went into I did fine arts, and then. But
hold on, before we go into the fine arts,
yeah.
Have you still got it?
No, I don't.
Daniel, no.
Yeah, it's something that had to go. It was just enormous. Like, it was the size of a small family car.
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
I just couldn't afford to keep it around.
Okay,
yeah.
I get it now. I get it.
Yeah.
All right. So fine arts.
Yeah. I did the conventional fine arts. I majored in painting. I minored in photography. I didn't do any sort of sculpture until much later in life, and that's where all of this sort of came about. But this had nothing to do with any training at any school at any time. It was just, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I think it's creating an environment that you feel that you want to be inside of. It's this sort of weird sort of, I don't know, I guess self-therapy, and that's where I really feel it is based from, and then it just sort of went on from there.
Did you learn from anyone else to do this, or is it self-taught?
No, completely self-taught, and it involved none of the skills that I'd picked up at the various arts schools that I'd gone to, or filmmaking for that matter. It was just something I did quietly alone and didn't tell anyone about, very much like the spaceship. That's why I feel like they have a kinship. And I started making this, and it was only until my neighbour, who would occasionally drop in, saw some of the work and said, you need to show people, like, you can't keep this to yourself.
And so what did you do? How do you then tell people about it? Where did you go? What did you do?
Well, I had an exhibition. I mean, that was the first thing. So there was the first exhibition at an ARI, an AIRI, and I don't know how this happened, but it was sort of reported on overseas. Like, there was some sort of online magazines and whatever that were picking up the story, and then I got people coming and sort of reaching out to me from overseas and saying,
so
"Oh my
it was
God!"
totally by accident in a way.
Just chance.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And what was the exhibition? You know, like what was it? Your architecture that you do a lot of?
No, it was very much. It was a series of buildings, and there was some much smaller works under glass. And the exhibition was called "Sets for a Film I'll Never Make."
Oh,
yeah. So,
I like it.
And it was very much about sort of being stuck in a way, because I couldn't find an avenue for what this was that I was doing. And so it sort of it spurred on from that, and it just got this international attention, and then an online publisher featured it, and then it got bigger, and then from there it just started to snowball. Like I got offers from places around the world, museums, and representation from galleries and whatnot, and so it just sort of escalated.
How fantastic!
Yeah.
I love that. So here you are. You know, like you must have to spend so much time by yourself, concentrating on what you're doing. But you obviously enjoy that. You know, like it must be so satisfying when you end up with a finished product. But that journey must take a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if I don't have any distractions, if I don't have any pressures or anything like that, and I'm allowed to just sit at the bench and just slowly chip away at something, it's quite therapeutic. It's sort of an anxiety release for me. It's very much about just closing off and just focusing on this little world that I'm creating. And it sort of empowers you when you feel powerless, because you're creating, you're sort of in a small sort of way playing God, and you're sort of putting things together, and you're manufacturing that environment that you might want to be in. So that's what it's very much about. So yeah, if there's no distractions, I love the process. It's very, very therapeutic, and it's very much like my work's seen in two ways. There's the obvious aesthetic, like people look at it and they're like, oh my God, it's made out of paper, it's so ornate, so delicate, so intricate. So that's the immediate thing. And I guess that's the people pleaser in me. I want people to appreciate the labour. But what drives the work underneath is very much my own psychological problems being sort of manifest in these little, sort of devices and machines and various sort of architectural whimsy and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Can you make money out of it? Is it a full-time occupation for you?
It has become a full-time occupation for me because it has to be. I mean, I have to put in the labour. There's no other way of generating it. Is it profitable? No, certainly not. But I have a very supportive partner.
Okay.
Who helps in that regard. So I'm very lucky in that regard.
Right.
And I'll do other things occasionally on the side as well. But yeah, it'd be wonderful for it to be sustainable entirely. Yeah.
Like, for instance, it's over my shoulder. It's a fairground with like the work that's there.
Yep.
Is it Coney Island, or is it vaguely?
Yeah, it is. It's actually based a little bit on Luna Park, in fact.
Luna Park, oh,
yeah.
okay.
So the guy who created Coney Island had, what he had done is he had branched out to other countries. And so our Luna Park here in Melbourne, in St Kilda, as well as the one in Sydney, are very much reminiscent of the original Coney Island. And there's a Luna in their title somewhere as well. I think they call something Luna Park there. So it was my connection between New York and Melbourne, where I made it and where it would end up being. But it's not specifically based on, it's my own interpretation of it, or it's very much a case of me taking elements of that, but then fusing it in with my own motifs, which there are many of that you don't notice in its large scale, but when you look at it in detail, there are little stories and details that develop. That.
How long did that take you to make?
That one took 18 months, so start to finish, yeah.
So were you working on other things along the way, or was it just that?
It was just that.
For 18 months.
Yeah. When I get commissions, which is what that was, it gives me the freedom to not have to worry about doing anything but the thing.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, I was basically a factory generating all the trusses, because there's an inordinate amount of trusses.
Yes.
And there doesn't need to be. Like, it's structurally, it's not necessary. And if you look at any real roller coaster, you'll note that it doesn't have anywhere near the cross members holding it up.
Yeah.
But I just thought it just looked so beautiful. It's called lattice, and that's very much about that particular element. And there's something about the combination of hundreds of these little members, which are absolutely pathetically weak on their own, coming together to create quite a strong structure. And so it was really important. I knew the work that it was going to take, and I could have cheated, to use another term, but I went, nah.
Yeah.
And I even had people who were like, oh, you can get machines to do this now. And it's like, well, that's not what people want. They don't want a machine to do it. Yeah.
Have you learned a lot about architecture because of it? You know, like the structure of, well, like even the pyramids or whatever that was built hundreds and thousands of years ago. Has it given you a bit of an insight of how they built the scaffolding and all that? Have you thought of it on that level?
Oh, very much so. Like, I'm a big history buff, structural engineering, should I say. I love all types of engineering, whether they're making elaborate machines or structures for the superstructure of a building and all that sort of stuff. And all of the historical things, they all play a part. And I devour that information. I don't know how much relevance it really has in what I do, because what I do doesn't weigh a lot, and it's really not hard for it to stay up. But I do like emulating that. I like this very fragile material to look like it's a really strong material, like it's a piece of iron or masonry that could really hold itself up. Yeah. But I don't think it needs to. You can get away with a lot less.
Where did that go if it was a commission work?
Yep. So it went into the foyer of a school in one of the boroughs of New York City. So so it will live there forever. It's a permanent piece.
And is it in a glass case or something?
Yeah. I was really lucky. They made a beautiful, what they call a niche, which is just like an inbuilt shelf, and they put glass over and it just sort of seals it in like a time capsule. Yeah.
And did you go over for the unveiling of it? How proud must you have been to be there when people saw this for the first time, and the detail that you've achieved? It must have been wonderful for you.
Yeah, it was. It was really, they were all, taken aback when they saw the size of it, because they knew it was going to be big, but they didn't realise.
Oh, how big is it?
It's the largest work I've ever made. So it's about 3 metres wide by 2 metres in height.
Gosh.
By about 50 centimetres in depth, because it's a very shallow sort of thing.
But I suppose it would have to, because of the amount of detail. If it was any smaller than that, you'd go crazy, I suppose, wouldn't you?
Yeah, true. But a lot of my work is only about 30 centimetres by 15 centimetres by 40 centimetres. So it is quite small and very detailed within that very small footprint. But this gave me the luxury of having, to build a lot more detail into it, just due to the scale of it and everything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you also built some other beautiful rooftops of New York as well, with the water tanks on top, which are just beautiful. Was that, was it when you went there that you saw all that and that gave you the inspiration to do that?
No, not necessarily. I've always been an avid admirer of New York City. I've been to New York quite a number of times. Okay. And a lot of my sort of influence, especially with the architectural styles that I use with the Art Deco, which I really like, is very much inspired by New York. Even before I went, I'd seen imagery. Obviously, it's a very famous city, and so that all played in. But no, it didn't. No, because this only happened last year. So I was building those buildings much prior to that. So but I've always been a big fan of New York City, and and the water towers. And there's a whole story behind that, going back to the historical nature of those water towers and how they're constructed, and the company that constructs them. It's like there's only 2 in the world, and they still make them out of timber, and why you'd think, but
Explain to our viewers why are they on the top of the buildings?
Right, so basically, this is going to be really boring, but basically what they do is they pump the water into the tower. I'm going to be as quick as I can, and they let it settle up there, and then when someone needs the water in the building, anything above 3 stories needs a water tower in New York City. It's a very ancient...
I know, I find it fascinating.
Yeah, America, for all of its sort of progressive technologies and everything like that, there are some things about their country and their states and whatever that are really, really old school. But basically they pump the water up there and then it feeds it back down, and that way it can keep up with demand rather than a fuel-powered pump pumping the water up. So that's the reason. But the other reason they use timber and not steel is because it's got natural... what's the word when you don't get germs? Antibiotic.
Oh.
Not antibiotic. It's sort of antibacterial properties. The timber has that particular property.
Okay.
And also, once it gets waterlogged, it creates an automatic seal. And so the maintenance is very low.
Okay.
And if you look at a water tower, really boring now, there's belts around it, metal belts.
Yep.
And as the belts go down the water tower, they get closer and closer together, because that's where the pressure points are for it to burst. So that's why there's more support there than there is further up. So there you go.
And does it burst very often?
No,
they don't?
No, they're very good.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it works well.
Yeah, but I just love that.
Yeah.
And I know there's an artist that does those exclusively, yeah.
Oh, is there? Right. But the other side of it is that when I've spoken to you before in an interview, that you told me that you'll walk in somewhere and there'll be an air conditioning sitting up there, and you start looking at it and totally different to when we'd look at it and go, whatever, there's an air conditioner. But you actually try to work out how it's, how I could do it or how it's made, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like whenever I go anywhere in the world, and even just the streets of Melbourne, whatever, I'm always looking at the details, like the air ducts and the ducting, or the way the electricity is wired together along the buildings that provides the power. And all of that stuff's interesting for 2 reasons for me. A, it's because that's how civilization works. Like all of this stuff is hidden beyond, like most people don't take any note of, but that's what makes our lives so comfortable. And then the second thing is I'm just intrigued. I'm looking for a logic for it. Like, why did they route it that way? Why would you do that? And and Tokyo was one of those places where their ducting is they're just works of art in my mind. Like they are absolutely, what seemingly seem superfluous. Like you're like, why would you need that much ducting? Like, what is that achieving? But it's just fascinating to me, and I love to produce that in my work. Like I like to take some of those elements and regurgitate it in a different sort of way.
Yeah. You've done a bit of stop motion as well, where you've built towns, and I believe, and you don't want to talk too much about it, but there's somebody, a Melbourne person, who's won an Academy Award, who is in the middle of making a film at present, and you've helped a little bit along the way. How interesting is that it's been then, and sort of a camera will zoom through as if it's a real little town per se.
Stop motion is it's one of the oldest sort of cinema arts, and it involves literally moving an item frame by frame by frame. So I've often described it as working in slow motion, and you go through a process where there are these long hours. Like a scene that might take 30 seconds requires 9 hours of your time. And as you're going through that process, by the time you get to the end of it, you forget the trauma of that entire sort of arc and process of going through capturing all of these beautiful individual frames. And it's only the remnants of the film itself afterwards that you go, oh my God, that's what we were toiling here for. But I've been lucky enough to work on a few of feature-length stop motion films, which are very, very rare, mind you, and especially made in Australia. And I have, made a few of my own, once again, completely out of paper, which is not a good idea, and anyone will tell you that, because paper is not stiff. It bends and it depresses and all that sort of stuff.
But there's a little bit, sometimes a bit of cardboard, thin cardboard you use as well, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's 3 gauges
Which
I
is
use.
It's sort of like paper, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah, well, cardboard is paper.
Yeah, there's 3 gauges I use. I like to keep the palette very simple. I like to keep the work extremely complicated, but the process really simple. It's mainly to help me with my deficiencies as a human being, but it helps me create sort of very elaborate sort of constructions out of very simple means.
And what you would have learnt along the way from when you first started building that spaceship to now, the detail that you get and the tools you use, like that would have a big impact, wouldn't it? It's obviously very fine Stanley knife. Am I using the right term? Is it sort of like a Stanley
knife is your conventional tool, or a utility knife.
A scalpel.
Yeah, and those knives are sharp and they're very good, but they're not good enough. So what I use is a surgical scalpel that you get operated with, and so they're I use a specific blade type, number 11, which has just got the right contour.
Yeah.
And it's a surgical scalpel. It's a great tool. It's very, very sharp and gives you very, very precise cuts. It also allows your fingers to heal quickly if you do cut them, because it's surgical. But the other thing about it is the particular cardboard that I use is very, it's a recycled product. So it's 100% recycled and it's very fibrous. And so the blade only lasts maybe, I don't know, like 10 to 15 cuts before you'll blunt that blade. So I go through boxes of those blades.
Whoa, so there's another cost that comes into play.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
wow. And your imagination, like there's like a hot air balloon with a ship underneath it flying away, which is an obvious one that you would go with, but it's still so fun, so interesting. Like your mind must be racing all the time. Like, oh, I've just thought of this great idea, and then you spend the next month working on it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like there are little hidden narratives that drive the ideas, but a hot air balloon is, it's something very familiar to a lot of people. So it's nice to have something that people can relate to. And for me, the hot air balloon, like it tells a story. It's a story about my mum, about her seamstressing. The paper that I use for the hot air balloon, in fact, is her pattern paper, which I only have a small stash of, and it's slowly dwindling. So we're at a point now where it's getting more and more precious, and I might have to stop making that particular work because of that. But so there's all of these little hidden details and motifs that are embedded in there. But overall, it's a very aesthetically pleasing sort of object.
And do you sell those?
So the very small works are what galleries will sell. So they will sell them to collectors.
So and you have regular galleries that you show in, or you supply them?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Melbourne, Mars Gallery is my representative, and in I have galleries overseas as well that represent me as well.
Now, you've just been part of an exhibition, and it's about the Metro Tunnel. And I mentioned it in the intro that the cutting machine, I'm not sure it's got a name.
A TBM, a tunnel boring machine is what it's called.
Right, a boring machine, okay, obvious. So it's this machine that's going through, cutting out all the rock underneath ground. Now, you were lucky to go in and see the odd one, but not when you were making it. So you sort of knew what was being used, but then you use your imagination as well to create all the workings. My God, the detail of what's going on behind the scenes is ridiculous. Like, yes, there's a cutting part, but then you look at the backside of it and it's extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, to be perfectly honest, that front-facing part of that particular sculpture is the only thing that references the real tunnel boring machine. And then everything thereafter is my own invention.
And it's sort of a little bit old worldy that you've created.
Yeah.
And instead of it being the modern, cutting machine or boring machine, you've taken it to another level, another art form.
Yeah. It's in one ways I saw it as an autonomous machine that didn't have this sort of trailing platform with all of the utilities that required it to function. I like the fact that I could make it this sort of autonomous machine that bored on its own in a sense. But the other side of it, I do take in factors of like the various hydraulic systems that do what they have to do. But it's my interpretation. It's how I see things. There is a logic to everything I make, but it might not be a true logic that really relates to the real world.
Yeah. Has the people, or they're brought in from overseas, aren't they, these boring machines?
These ones are, yeah.
Has anyone, engineers looked at what you've done and had discussions with you about it, and would have been in awe over the fact that you've taken it to an art level?
Not this specific piece, but I have been at art fairs around the world where I have met engineers who have just been passing by and have noticed something I've made and gone, oh my God, and then gone into a whole long-winded story about how it actually functions and what have you. So,
and do they like the fact that you've taken it to another level with your imagination?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they love the fantasy element of it for sure. It gives them, it conjures up sort of moods or feelings about like what it might be doing or how it might be doing that thing, and I very much play into that.
Yeah. Now, with this boring machine that was part of the Metro, what was called the Metro Tunnel?
Creative program.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have it made, or did they approach you and say, "Will you produce something for this exhibition?"
Yeah, so that was also a commission. So it was very much a case of, we've got this project, we've seen your work, we really like what you do, and we think you might be a perfect fit for this particular project. And they were right. That was definitely something I was interested in.
Yeah. How long did it take to make?
That one took me about 12 months from start to finish.
Whoa.
I did have a few false starts with that because it sits on a bit of a cantilever, and that was a very difficult thing to do. I was like, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Could this be more trouble than it's worth? But I'm really glad that I over-engineered it to make it sit the way it does. So that was one element of it. But then there was the other element. When I first started, I made it in a way where I thought it was... I didn't like the particular elements that I was drawing attention to, so I then changed it up. And because I make everything... intuitively, so I don't think of an idea and go, okay, I'll draw it down and then I'll need a certain set of parts and I'll make all those parts and I'll put it together. I just it's sort of like, for me, it's very much like drawing. I'm sort of making elements, putting them together and then going, I don't like the proportions of that, scrap that, start again. I've got a studio full of bits that are not finished, and often people will come in and they'll look at that and they're like, what's wrong with this? And I'm like, that's a reject. That cannot see the light of day. We're going to hold on to that.
So you don't, that fascinates me, because I thought you would have done the whole draftsman thing of, wow, that makes it more interesting.
A lot of people think I've got a lot of patience, and I certainly do when it comes to actually making it.
Yes,
that part I don't have the patience for. I'm not sitting here and drawing it. I'm not doing it twice. We're already going to take a long time doing it one time. We're not doing it again in stages of schematic drawings and whatever.
And what was it like to be part of that exhibition? Because there was so many different elements of people's, in the art world that were presented there. It must be exciting for you to be part of an exhibition where you're with other people with a like-minded approach, but you're all doing things very differently.
Yeah, it always is. I mean, I work alone in a studio, in a vacuum. So it's so wonderful when you finish what you've been working on and you introduce it to the public and you're amongst other artists and you get to interact with them and hear their journey of how they got to where they got to and whatnot. So it's always good. And that's one of the sort of highlights. You get to sort of finally come out of that sort of enclosed space and sort of...
and what's happened to that bit? Do they screw it up and throw it away at the end of the exhibition? Of course they did. The look on your face then for a moment, you went, what?
Don't get me wrong, there's many times where I've wanted to see something. No, they house them. I make a very custom, as you can imagine, very elaborate box for these works to be shipped in, and so they put that in that box.
Is it going to end up in one of the stations, like on display?
Yeah,
hopefully
they
it
do
will.
have. I really don't know what life they have here on in, but yeah, they might go somewhere, or they might be presented in a permanent space.
I want to see it in the flesh. Like it's important.
I can ask some questions.
Yeah, come on. Push them into. Maybe they haven't thought of it, and they would think, "Oh shit, well, we must do that." Because like people would love to. There's going to be a lot of art in the stations anyway, so I can't see why they wouldn't use it.
I mean, it's a perfect piece to have displayed in a fancy office somewhere. So if that's something of interest, then, I'm open to that.
And I'm sure you probably can't say, but are you working on a few things, or have you got some commissions coming up, or what about even personally making something for the sheer love of it?
Yeah, I'm always doing that. That's what keeps me in practice, because every time I start a new work, I feel like I have to learn the skills all over again. It's a really weird sort of disconnection I have with my mind and my hands and what have you. Yeah, I have. I've got 2 major shows coming up towards the end of the year, so I'm working towards that.
Your own exhibitions?
Yeah, so there'll be exhibitions, one in Melbourne and one abroad, so there's that.
When you say abroad, where?
In London.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the other gallery.
2 separate ones, or will it be the same exhibition?
No, it's the 2 separate ones, yeah.
How much time are they going to take?
Well, they're ongoing, like it's not something, we don't do it at a whim, it's something that's planned. Like I sort of have a schedule which is planned prior to that. Sometimes they're very fine schedules, but yeah, it's not like I didn't start doing it today.
Yeah,
no.
And and the gallery would have to be booked and whatever.
Yeah.
London, New York. Daniel, thank you and congratulations on what you're doing, because what you've achieved is magical. It is magical what you're doing, and you're like, it's another world that you've created, and your art form is extraordinary. I'd love to be inside your mind. No, I wouldn't, because you'd cut me out of cardboard and stick me in a display box.
I'd be very gracious. I'd give you all of the things that you need in that cardboard world. Absolutely. Yeah, it's nice to be part of a cardboard world. It helps you get out of the real one every so often.
Yeah. Well, again, congratulations, and you're amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
I'm David Hunt. You've been watching The Art Hunter, and we'll be back again next week. See ya.